Hello and welcome to my review of Phantom Thread. Now before we get into the film, I've wanted to kind of announce to any of my regular viewers that I'm going to try to do more new release reviews on the channel, starting now basically. I'm able to get to the cinema a bit more than I was in previous years, and so I've decided I'm going to try and cover as many films as I can and talk about new films on release and do the things that most other YouTubers do, which is talk about the new movies that have just come out. I usually will get to say the big superhero films and the big blockbusters, you know, Blade Runner, War for the Planet. I don't know for War for the Planet of the Apes actually, but Star Wars, as always, you know, I'll be covering those films. But the more, you know, under the radar movies, this one not so much. This has kind of got a lot of buzz around it. Phantom Thread, the latest film from Paul Thomas Anderson. I've seen, I think, only a couple of his films really. Boogie Nights, which I saw far too young, and Magnolia, which had a real impression on me and an impact on me when I was a teenager. I haven't seen it since, and I think that's it really. So coming into this film, I certainly wasn't, oh yes, Paul Thomas Anderson once again. You know, I know that he makes great films, and certainly the lead actor of this film is a star attraction unto himself, and that is Daniel Day-Lewis. I had never seen a Daniel Day-Lewis performance until Phantom Thread, so it's weird to come into a respected and lauded and, you know, huge actor like Daniel Day-Lewis, who's won 3 Academy Awards and all that kind of stuff, and not just the awards, but just critically, you know, and just movie fans generally have kind of said, yeah, he's one of the greats. And I'd never seen him act before. Never, in nothing. So I got to go back, I got to see My Left Foot, I've got to see, you know, There Will Be Blood, all that kind of stuff. It's just one of those things that has escaped me for some reason. And again, coming into it, knowing this was his last performance, and I'm a little bit mixed on stuff like this, where it's like the actors kind of reveal their process, and he's very well known for being a method actor, stays in character when he's making the films, all this kind of stuff, and, you know, is very serious about his craft. And once he finished filming this, Phantom Thread, in 2017, his team announced he's retiring from acting. I don't know whether I like that, whether it's, you know, it's kind of inviting people into the... I mean, I like the behind-the-scenes, you know, developments of films and things like that. I love all of that stuff, but coming into a film, not to compare it too closely with Jared Leto, but, you know, to come into a film like Suicide Squad and know what Jared Leto has been doing behind the scenes to get into character kind of takes it away from me a little bit. I really don't know much about the guy in general, and again, I don't know what he sounds like. I read that he uses his real accent in the film, so I'm assuming he's a chameleon and does different accents in other films and things like that. Anyway, let's get to the film itself, Phantom Thread, and set up the plot first before we get into my thoughts and feelings on it, of which I feel like I could talk forever about. A lot to say about this film. Let's get into the story. So, it stars Daniel Day-Lewis as Reynolds Woodcock. In 1950s London, he is a custom dressmaker. Basically, he runs this high-end kind of fashion establishment. It doesn't really feel like a shop. It feels like a proper kind of rich blood place. You know, it's this big kind of house in London, and right from the beginning of the film, we see that a Duchess comes to get fitted for a dress. He does these custom, beautiful dresses, and he has poured his life into it. This is his life work. You know, he takes it very seriously. He has a partner who is not getting much attention from him. There's a great scene at the beginning where they're having breakfast and his girlfriend is saying to him, you know, basically paraphrasing, we need to kind of talk more. And he's just like, I haven't got time for a confrontation right now. You know, normal people, this would turn into a row, a big argument, a fight. He just looks and just says, I simply do not have any time today for a confrontation. And that's the end of the story. You know, his work comes first, so we get that right from the beginning. And the film follows him falling in love with a girl, maybe. And that's one of the interesting parts of this film to me, is trying to figure out what's going on inside the head of Reynolds Woodcock. Does he really love her, or is she simply the next one? The next person to be there, the next person for him to make dresses for and fit them around and stuff, and then cast aside once he has no use for her. And his sister, Cyril, is kind of his right-hand woman. She runs all the business and that kind of stuff of his Woodcock establishment with all the dresses that he makes, but he is the, you know, he's the one who does the actual nitty-gritty of designing these dresses. He has a team who put them together and things, and he does the stitching himself. And I love the part where he talks about how he leaves messages inside like coats and things and dresses. He'll sew these little messages inside the kind of you know, the fabric basically, and just I love that idea, and we get to kind of see a little bit more of his personality when he starts talking to this new girl that he's met called Alma. It's a European girl played by Vicky Creeps, and the whole film is about their relationship, this new girl that he's met, and how the relationship falls in line with his work, his you know, his day-to-day life. You know, how they don't really kind of gel in terms of things like breakfast, where she's buttering her toast, you know, too loudly for him, you know. But what's really interesting is that Alma isn't one to be a shrinking violet. She isn't one to take Woodcock's shit and just sit there and go, yes sir, you know, and be enamored with him, with his flamboyance and his charisma and his exquisite skill in making these dresses, and just decides to kind of, you know, okay, let him walk all over me. She fights back. She tries to do things differently. There's an incredible scene where she decides she's going to make dinner for Reynolds, and so she asks Reynolds' sister Cyril, can you take everyone out of the house for the evening so I can make him dinner, so it's just the two of us? And Cyril's like, no, that is not going to go well. He likes his routine, you're not doing it. And Alma says, no, I have to do this for myself, so you will do this. Okay, fair enough. All the people leave the house, Alma cooks food, Reynolds comes back home and he sees the house empty and he just can't cope. He's like, where's Cyril? Where's my sister? When's she coming back? You know, and you just see this man who is so ingrained with the day-to-day routine. Everything has to be done specifically. I wouldn't say it's OCD. It probably is OCD, but it's very particular. And right at the beginning of the film, we see him kind of, you know, trimming his nose hair and very carefully arranging his hair. Like, you just see right from the beginning what kind of a person this is, and that just gets further explored throughout the film. But I loved how this was a different kind of romance. This wasn't about finding someone and falling in love with them. This was about maintaining a relationship, but through a very twisted means. And I don't want to spoil anything initially, so I will warn you before I get to any spoilers, and I'll kind of round up my thoughts of the film before we get to any spoiler territory. So I loved Daniel Day-Lewis in this film. I thought his acting was phenomenal. I loved all the little tics of his character. I found him very funny and endearing and unlikable. That was the key thing, was that I admired him in a way. I felt kind of captivated by his charisma, but I didn't like him at the same time, and I thought he wasn't the nicest guy, but I could kind of see where the niceness was underneath the surface. Very layered performance. I have to, you know, tip my hat to him. Obviously, the hype around his acting and his performances, and how he only does a film every few years or so when he really feels the need to, is warranted. And obviously I'll have to see for myself and go back and see his other films and stuff to see what I think, but purely based on this, hell of a job. I thought Vicky Creeps was fantastic too as Alma, in a maybe a difficult role. There's a scene in the film that is towards the end where it's Alma and it's Reynolds and they're just looking at each other. And it goes on, I want to say, for at least 2 minutes. It might not be, it might have felt that long, but it's just this incredible piece of acting from both of them, where there's so much going on and you really want to know what they're thinking, and they're kind of giving it away, but they're kind of not. And I just thought the acting was a real standout of the film, including Leslie Manville, who plays Cyril, Reynolds' sister. I liked her progression throughout the film. It's interesting because it's one thing and it's not at the same time. Cyril is very regimented, you know, she does the things and runs the establishment and all that kind of stuff, but she kind of progresses, but by the end she still is the same person. And really I think it's her relationship with Alma, which isn't too overt in the film, but it's there, and it kind of changes very subtly throughout the entire film, which I thought was really well done. It didn't feel like, okay, we need to get it from A to B, and let's do this. It just felt more natural, and not over the top. Believable, I suppose. And there's events in the film towards the end that maybe tip the believability scale, but I liked that stuff. I loved the way that it was shot. I loved the way it was edited. It felt like it suited the tone of the story. You know, 50s London, exquisite dressmaking, very careful, considerate. The editing reflected that. The cinematography reflected that. Slow fades into other scenes. There's a scene where they go on holiday, and it'll crossfade into snow, and then into the next scene. It just felt very, like I say, careful, delicate. You know, it matched the tone of the story. I thought that was really. The score is incredible. It's this kind of classical style that was so enjoyable to listen to. I think that the best thing about this film for me was that I didn't feel like I was going to enjoy it. I felt like this isn't for me, but I want to see it. I want to see what the fuss is about with Daniel Day-Lewis. It's nominated for a couple of Oscars and stuff. I always like to see those films every year. So I took the chance to go and see it, and I slowly was getting a little bit nervous. Like, I don't like the setting here, dressmaking. It's not my kind of thing. But it was almost like I'd been sat in that cinema and someone had put a dress on me. This is going to be a terrible analogy, but it felt like someone had put a dress on me, and I was uncomfortable. Even though I'm in a darkened room, I'm uncomfortable. No one's looking at me, but I just don't like the feel of it. I don't wear dresses. I never have. Not my thing. And then, you know, half an hour into the film, I'm thinking, alright, well, it's a bit uncomfortable, but it's not the worst thing in the world, you know. And then maybe an hour into the film, it's like, well, this dress is actually, it's pretty comfortable. I'm kind of, you know, and then by, you know, hour and a half into the film, thinking, maybe there's other dresses I can try, you know, in terms of, like, maybe there's other Daniel Day-Lewis performances, maybe there's other Paul Thomas Anderson films I can go and watch, and by the end of it, I was just so wrapped in by it that it was so comfortable, but gripping, you know. I was so invested in where these two characters were going, or three characters even. I was kind of invested in where Cyril would end up in all of this, but mainly it's Alma and Reynolds and their very interesting up and down relationship and where it went, and just very loaded. I thought that it was a phenomenal film, and I'm really glad I waited a few days to review it because it's only grown on me. You know, I rated it like 4.5 after I got out of the cinema. I think I'd bump it up to a 5 because it is stuck with me. As soon as I left the cinema, I was thinking in my head, what shall I say in the review? I sometimes do this, because I do these in one take. I don't prepare anything or write anything down. So sometimes I'll think in my head, what shall I say in the video? And I was thinking in my head on the bus, I was thinking, I'd probably say that this is a film that I loved, but I wouldn't watch again for another maybe 5-10 years. If time was unlimited, I'd go and see it again tomorrow, and I really want to see it again soon. There's just something about it that I found, and it's mainly Daniel Day-Lewis and his performance, and just how, you know, it reminds me of, you know, performances like Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner, where every movement of the face, every gesture is just so interesting to me, you know, and I get so caught up in the character. And watching him and listening to him, you know, the tone of his voice, his physical movements, everything. It's a complete performance, and I suppose it's kind of not cliched, but you know, everyone gives him, you know, rave reviews as far as his performances go, and I'm gonna have to fall in line with that and say he was incredible in the film. But I thought all across the board it was great. There was one actress, I don't think she was even an actress, I read that there were some real dressmakers who were hired to play the dressmakers at the Woodcock establishment. And one of those women comes in and she's like, oh, there's a cut, there's a tear in the dress, and there's a thing underneath, and it was really just the one moment in the film that just felt unbelievable to me as far as acting was concerned. I felt like I was watching someone reading a line. So, you know, there was a little blip there, but apart from that, you know, stunning film. So I loved it. I don't know whether I'm going to rate these films in these reviews, but 4.5 to 5. I just thought it was fantastic, and is in my top 5 of the year so far. Though we're only into February, so that doesn't really matter. I'll try and leave maybe like my current top 5 ranking somewhere in this video, so you can see that, and I'll kind of check in with that when it changes throughout the year. So there we go. That was my review of Phantom Thread, and now we'll get into a brief spoiler discussion. So, as it transpires, Alma, in her frustration of not being able to have Reynolds to herself, leads to her cutting up some poisonous mushrooms and putting them into his tea. He gets ill, so she's there to care for him, to mother him, and it's very driven into us how much his mother meant to him in his life, and how he has a lock of her hair sewn into his the breast of his coat so that she's with him always. He's very precious about his mother. And I love how that played into the film, how he had the vision of his mother when he was sick in bed. It felt like a fever dream, and the lighting and just the way that was captured was so beautiful. And Alma is there to care for him, and it's not clear to me whether she knew that it would make him ill but not kill him. I suppose by the end we do realize that, because we see her carefully cutting things up and stuff, and that ending, you know, where she poisons him again. And he looks at her, and we wonder if he realizes that she's doing this, and he cuts it up and he eats it. And he looks at her, this is the scene I'm talking about, where they're just looking at each other. And then she says, without really saying it, you know, you're going to be ill for a while, you won't die, but I'll be able to care for you. I want you helpless on your back, so I can care for you, nurse you back to health, and then I want you to be strong again. And then he, with a little smile, says, well, you know, kiss me quick before I get sick. And it's just like, the people in the cinema just burst into laughter because it was so ridiculous. And then we end on that note. And it's almost like a bit of a, is it a dream sequence where she's imagining them with a small child and stuff in the future. It's almost to the point where you think maybe it went wrong, I don't know. But it's a very strange ending, but it's one that I loved in its strangeness. And the idea that he was willing to kind of, you know, yeah, alright, you can poison me every once in a while, and I'll get really sick and it'll suck, but it'll be alright for you and it'll make this relationship work. You know, and that was something throughout the whole film where I was thinking he doesn't love her, she's just the next girl, and she's trying to get that love from him. And when he gets sick and she nurses him back to health and he says in the morning, I love you. You know, I think she says I love you a few times in the film and he just doesn't really, you know, reciprocate. But when he does, it's this moment, it says, and this is a great like one shot where they're slowly zooming in. And I thought it was so well done. And then they get married, which he never did. He said, I could never marry anyone because I wouldn't want to be deceitful. So we see that this is, you know, we don't have to wait till the end of the film to realize that she is special to him. She isn't just another woman. But even then, after they're married and the honeymoon period is over, he gets really frustrated and says, look, she is ruining everything for me. I can't concentrate on my work. And she overhears this, so you think, okay, it's over. But she sticks with it because she loves him, and it's almost like this big over the top, you know, metaphor, comparison, whatever you want to call it, to a relationship, a long-term relationship where you got to make things work. You have to make compromises. You don't have to poison each other, but that's kind of like, for a high-maintenance person like Reynolds Woodcock, it feels like that's the way to make that kind of a relationship work. And if you've got someone crazy enough to do it to you, you know, and to, you know, be alright with that, I guess that maybe that's all that matters. I don't know. It's not a film that I could completely analyze or anything like that, but I just find myself returning to it in my mind over and over again, and wanting to see it again, and wanting to experience the performances again. And that, to me, is the mark of a great film. So there we go, that's my thoughts on Phantom Thread. Overall, I would say, again, I could really rattle on more, but this is getting too long as it is. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you, 'cause